So, expanding upon even more Elliotte Friedman conversations today, we are diving over to the Vancouver Canucks as well as giving an update on the Buffalo Sabres, expansion bros, 1970 and beyond, all the way to 2024 when Elliotte Friedman is writing about both of these teams and their trade situations. Now, in the last video, we went over some comments Friedman made on the 32 Thoughts podcast. In this video, we're going over to some comments made by Friedman on the 32 Thoughts article. Because this piece was published earlier this afternoon by Friedman, 32 Thoughts soft talks are underway between the NHL, NHLPA for the next CBA. Now, that actually is some really big news. The collective bargaining agreement, they're already starting to draft out some ideas for what the next one could look like. But in this video, we're not talking about anything CBA. Instead, we're going over onto some of the trade talk. Because if you scroll down, there are some extended conversations that Friedman brings up in regards to the Sabres as well as Vancouver. But with that in mind, we'll start out with the earlier of the two that shows up in the article first. Let's take a look at thought number 7 as spoken about by Frege. Here are some other stuff. The Buffalo Sabres are getting calls on Dylan Cozens. This would terrify me if I were the Sabres. Vultures circling overhead while a player and team struggle. Right shot center, 23 years old, 2 years removed from a 30-goal season. He is also signed on for 5 more seasons at $7.1 million AAV, helping his value. I would be very, very careful with this because he's legitimately wanted. Number 8. Buffalo goes back-to-back on the weekend in Washington and Toronto. I'm curious to see if Lindy Ruff's in-game benchings of JJ Peterka and Owen Power during Wednesday's 3-2 loss to the Rangers are a one-off or a new trend. Taking away 1 or 2 shifts hasn't worked, the coach said post-game, before praising both players for how they perform when put back in. Now that they've played 29 games, Ruff can argue he started with an open mind and waited long enough to see what everyone's got. Power said all the right things about mistakes that led to his benching and scored late in the third period. And then finally for Buffalo, during prep for an interview with JJ Peterka at the NHL and NHLPA's European Media Tour in Prague, another player said that Peterka is notoriously hard on himself. He admitted that that's true. Yeah, probably last year was too much because I expect so much out of myself. Bad things last too long in my head, I would say. Breathe in, breathe out, go on to the next shift. So things in Buffalo aren't really looking all too great right now when you acknowledge just the status as to what people are asking for out of this team and its players. In particular, Dylan Cozens being linked in the trade market is certainly an interesting add, because Dylan Cozens, in my mind at least, is one of these perennial stars to be in Buffalo. We had spoken about this yesterday. Friedman made some other comments as to what's wrong with the Sabres or one of the biggest problems that is plaguing this organization. It's the fact that you have so many top-of-the-line superstars that have had their way through Buffalo through some form or another. Jack Eichel was drafted, developed, and then eventually traded by Buffalo. Sam Reinhart, same thing. You had Brandon Montour, Linus Ullmark, Ryan O'Reilly. A lot of really talented guys have made their way through the Sabres organization, but they didn't play their best hockey in the Sabres organization. And so you kind of have to think to yourself, is this a symptom of impatience? Is this a symptom of not really developing your guys right? What allows these players to play well in other organizations and be some of the best players in the league in other organizations, but to not exhibit any of that with the Buffalo Sabres either? It's been a problem that has persisted for, let's just say, the past decade. And considering the way the Buffalo Sabres have been playing this season, it's not really one that is looking to get any better over the next little while here. So for Dylan Cozens, let's go over the profile here. 23 years old, signed on till the end of 2030, making $7.1 million. Big guy, 6'3", right-handed player. The workhorse from Whitehorse, who had himself 68 points and 31 goals in 81 games 2 seasons ago. Last year, he declined in point production to 47 points in 79 games, and this year he is on pace for even fewer, with a 13-point in 29-game marker at the time of recording this audio. He is certainly not as good as he had been in the past, but the question is this really something that we can expect to get better, or is this just the tail of the tape? Is he a young guy going through slumps, or is he just not that great? He's 23, so obviously there's a lot of potential here for him to continue to grow and achieving higher highs as a member of the Sabres. But the question is, if teams are going out there and asking, hey, that 23-year-old that you guys just committed so many years and so many dollars to, we want him. If teams are going out there and saying that, then Friedman does have a point here. It indicates that other teams don't really respect what the Buffalo Sabres are doing. They're not looking at the Sabres and saying, yeah, these guys know what they're doing. They're really putting things together in the right way. They're saying, oh, they're vulnerable. This is a team that doesn't have that much direction with their future. They don't have much direction with Dylan Cozens. We all want this guy because we see value in him, and the Buffalo Sabres are seeing declining play out of this player. So the question is, really, is he going to be able to bounce back? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel firstly about teams going out there and asking about Dylan Cozens in any sort of a trade capacity? Do you think this is a really big deal? Do you think we can see a Dylan Cozens trade coming soon? And what does this mean for the rest of the Buffalo Sabres and the assets that they have when a guy who is as potentially valuable like Dylan Cozens is seen as somebody who is on the market right now? And of course, I mean, if you wanted to talk about the other guys, we did speak about JJ Peterka and Owen Power and some of the ways that Lindy Ruff has been treating his players the past little while here, although I do acknowledge that those guys might not actually have much trade movement or trade conversations compared to Dylan Cozens at the moment. So with that in mind, let's go over to the next few thoughts here, because the next two after the Buffalo talk, they are Vancouver-related ideas. So let's go over to thought 10 and thought 11. Vancouver is trying to find a better fit for Vincent Desharnais. It just has not worked out as everyone had hoped. The Canucks are interesting. There's a little bit of, let's see what this looks like now that Thatcher Demko and JT Miller are back, but it is in Jim Rutherford's DNA to be on the trade prowl. It makes it tougher to predict what they are going to do, and Vancouver makes calls. This is interesting because a lot of the things that we had seen last year, the Nikita Zadorov trade, the Kuzmenko trade, those were kind of short-lived trade moments. Like, they kind of just happened. We saw the Kuzmenko trade go down, and we waited a little bit to get some of the insider info revealed, but for the most part, there wasn't any huge brewing thoughts like, oh yeah, Zadorov is going to go to Vancouver, and we had to wait a little bit. No, there was a Kuzmenko buzz for a while, but that wasn't really all too surprising. That had persisted since the guy signed his contract extension the year prior. But for Vancouver, it's kind of true that they make trades at surprising times. And so for Elliotte Friedman to go out there and talk about Vancouver in this way, firstly, it doesn't really surprise anybody that Vinny Desharnais' name has been tossed out there. We had already seen the comments made by Rick Dhaliwal after all. But also, with Desharnais, we had spoken about this in the video yesterday, but he actually has played pretty well alongside of Erik Brannstrom, and some of the advanced analytics have also been good too. So I hope, this is just my personal sort of belief, but I hope that there are NHL teams out there that are looking at the numbers, the advanced stats, the fancy things, and saying, oh, look at that, Vinny Desharnais on the market. He's only making $2 million. He's big. Okay, only making $2 million. That's kind of a oxymoron right there, but he's a big guy, 6'7", right-handed player who has great advanced analytics on the PK and with Erik Brannstrom. We got to go out there and get this guy. Part of the reason he even got $2 million is because he's a big right-handed guy. So I honestly wouldn't doubt it if there was at least one NHL team that looked at Desharnais, saw the same things that Vancouver saw, and said, hey, he's available, let's try to trade for him, he's a steal. We could go out there and get this guy who's a good analytical player. And then they actually play with him and they realize, oh, he's not that great. Like, his lack of hockey sense, his own defensive presence isn't really all too refined. There are some bad decisions that he makes sometimes in the zone. And ultimately, he does have those intangible tools that you can't teach. Of course, you can't teach size. You can't teach somebody to be 6'7". But as it pertains to Vancouver, we've seen this a lot with Rutherford and Alvin. If something's not working, they trade the guy right away. Andrei Kuzmenko, they traded him in January last year, so maybe it took a while, but they traded him right away. Daniel Sprong, they traded him right away. Even last year, they traded away Jack Studnicka right away. They traded away Tanner Pearson right away. They make trades, man. The Vancouver Canucks certainly are ambitious in that respect. And so Vinny Desharnais seems like he could be next in line. I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about Vancouver's trade situation here with Desharnais? What are your thoughts on Dylan Cozens and the Buffalo Sabres as well? It's all coming to us from Elliotte Friedman, and I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. and bye.